Hello everybody and welcome back to the world of Pokemon. My name is Professor Noki and you're joining me once again for another Pokemon Theory where we're going to be heading back to the future. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the latest theory regarding Pokemon Sword and Shield, which regards the fact that the Galar region and all the stories that take place within it very well may be held in the future of the Pokemon games. For those of you who might not be aware, the Pokemon timeline is actually broken down between a couple of different multiverses that exist in the Pokemon world. And if you're interested in learning more about the existence of these universes, I would highly suggest you check out my previous Pokemon theory, Into the Pokeverse. In this video, I break down the varying multiverses that exist parallel to one another, which essentially includes the regular verse and the Megaverse. Now, for Pokemon Sword and Shield, it is quite obvious that this game does not take place in the Megaverse, as there are no Mega Evolutions anywhere to be seen. So, for now, let's assume that these games take place in the regular verse. Chronologically, in this universe, the events of Kanto in Red, Blue, and Yellow actually take place at the exact same time as Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald in Hoenn. And then, only a few short years later, Johto's Gold, Silver, and Crystal occur alongside Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum in Sinnoh. Between 3 to 5 years after that, the entirety of the events of Unova take place in Black and White, and then a couple years later in Black and White 2. And although we haven't actually seen them in game, logic would dictate that there are indeed non-Mega alternative versions for the adventures in Kalos of X and Y, and those in Alola of Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon. That being the case, X and Y actually coincide at the same time as the events of Black and White 2, with the Alola games coming 3 to 5 years after that. So, where exactly do Sword and Shield and their storylines fit into all of this? Well, for starters, the previous games' timelines were actually deducted by cross-referencing the different stories of the NPCs in-game, deeply researching the in-game lore, and analyzing the technological advancements of the humans that live there, as well as searching for any reoccurring characters that give us a hint as to when these games take place. So, taking the same deductive approach for Pokemon Sword and Shield, we begin with what we can learn from the NPCs in-game, where, for starters, we get absolutely no mention whatsoever from absolutely anybody of any previous important character from any of the other games at all. In fact, they barely mention the other regions altogether outside of essentially acknowledging that they exist. And not to mention, the only character that really gives us any indication at all as for a timeline that can be established for Sword and Shield is Opal. It is learned that Opal has actually been the fairy-type gym leader of Bellonlea for 70 years, taking it over at a very young age from her mother, which would actually give us the indication that the Gym Challenge and maybe even the Champions Cup in Galar have been around for at least 100 plus years. Now, taking into consideration what we know of the timelines from other games, including the fact that Professor Oak has actually been in his position for about 30 to 40 years, and modern Pokeballs have only been used for approximately the same amount of time. Not to mention, in previous games, the Pokemon League as a whole, the authoritative body that actually organizes, controls, and regulates all Pokemon training, has only been around for about 100 years as well. And obviously you can really start to see where the speculation is growing that these games don't exactly take place right after the end of the events of Sun and Moon. Though, to get the most accurate picture, we must really break down absolutely everything we know about these games, including the in-game lore, which many of you already know is very centered around Eternatus and the Darkest Day. Interestingly enough, it is learned throughout the game that the Darkest Day took place 3,000 years ago. Now, for those of you who've been playing Pokemon for any length of time and actually played through the X and Y games as well, you'll recognize that 3,000 years sounds awfully familiar, as it actually takes place at the exact same time as the Great War in Kalos and the launch of the ultimate weapon, which actually led to the split in the multiverse to begin with and the creation of Mega Evolution. Since there is actually no mention of this war or of the event at all, it would lead me to believe that this never took place in the timeline that Sword and Shield inhabits. And that maybe, just maybe, the firing of the ultimate weapon in the Megaverse actually created the darkest day in Galar to begin with. That the firing of the ultimate weapon was actually powerful enough to rip a hole in space and time and allow Eternatus to wiggle through into the regular verse. However, we can't conclude this theory just quite yet, as we still have to analyze all of the technological advancements that were made by the people of Galar versus the people in the games that came before. Not only is it apparent when you take a look at the fact that trainers are actually able to transfer Pokemon remotely to and from boxes without accessing a PC at the local Pokemon Center, but also for the advancements that have been made to the Rotom Dex, including the ability to now connect it to so many different things in the Pokemon world, including your bike, and even the Rotami station. And the people of Galar also seem to work a lot more closely with Pokemon in order to shape the future of their region, which is very obvious when you look throughout the region and see just how developed and established it has become. There are very few wild and unexplored areas throughout, including the wild area even. Through their technological achievements, they were even able to take the greatest cataclysm that has ever befallen the Galar region and turn it into the biggest sports spectacle that the Pokemon world has ever seen. It is quite obvious really that Galar is much more technologically advanced than any of the regions that came before it. To draw our conclusion, we must finally take a look at the reoccurring, or rather absence of reoccurring characters in these games. As I mentioned previously, absolutely nowhere in this game is there any reference made in any of the dialogue at all to any previous character or event from past games. We also receive no cameos whatsoever from any of the previous gym leaders, important NPCs, rivals, or even Looker himself, who has basically become a staple in the Pokemon franchise. So, as I'm sure you can probably start to piece together, it really does appear that Pokemon Sword and Shield does not connect in any way, shape, or form to the timeline of the previous games. However, it is important to note that this could also be explained by the emergence of an entirely new universe altogether that Pokemon Sword and Shield would take place in. This would be outside of the regular and mega universes that exist, and therefore none of the events or people that took place within them would be included in this new universe. And I'm sure many of you are probably asking yourself at this point, why exactly would Game Freak make these games not take place chronologically along with all the other games they provided us thus far? And in my opinion at least, I think this is probably due to the fact that they really wanted a fresh start for the Pokemon games, a soft reboot of sorts. The interwoven universes and timelines of the previous games really started to get a bit complex and hard to follow along with, and ultimately this simplifies everything, while also allowing them to play around with brand new characters and storylines altogether. In fact, it would even allow them to allude to and make reference to all the previous games and events without being entirely tied down to them. All in all, we will definitely see with the upcoming release of the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra as to where these DLCs will take the in-game lore and storyline, and whether or not they'll actually end up making any references or connections to the past games. And I'm also very intrigued to see where they end up incorporating the Diamond and Pearl remakes, and as for what timeline and Pokeverse they'll take place in. Though, for now, I thoroughly hope you enjoyed this Pokemon theory, and I would love to see all of your thoughts and speculations in the comments down below. Also, if you're new to the channel and would like to stay up to date on all of my daily content, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this has been Professor Noki signing out once again for ProfNoki.